So I'm adding this in as a preamble, just because yesterday I decided to record this video, a spur of the moment. That being said, I coined this term that I describe as the endless sleepover, which describes like a kind of content that we see in our like postmodern age, that are activities that would often be done at a sleepover. So whether that be playing video games with somebody else, reacting to a video with somebody else, or like doing your makeup, and then a certain parallel play is not encouraged by the viewer, but it's like naturally the next thing that like you anticipate that somebody's going to be doing their makeup while like you talk as a content creator, or like eating a meal as a content creator, and like somebody's going to be eating a meal with you, right? Like you anticipate that. And that being said, at one point in time I do later on say that like I described things as like pornographic, and I don't mean that in an innately like sexual pornographic way. I mean that in a fact that like it's a certain level of wealth porn, in the same way that like car exploitation films are like car exploitation porn. Like it exploits a certain object within a thing as a fetish, in the traditional sense of the word fetish, as a fixation, right? Like, so car exploitation films are you enjoying cars getting destroyed, jumping, all of that. Like, the centerpiece of a car exploitation film is not the story, it's the car. So you have that, and then that's what I mean when things are like soft core wealth porn, or like stuff is hardcore wealth porn, right? Like, there's not a lot of soft core wealth porn, and that's thanks to this is kind of getting into the idea of the society of the spectacle, but everything is like speculative, right? And you have simulation, simulacrum, and that's kind of what I'm touching on. Though without getting too much into, I know I'm reading Bouillard's Seduction right now, which like has more to do with like the law of attraction and kind of being open, like having an open heart to the universe to allow yourself to be seduced by it, etc., etc. That being Hello, I feel like Charles Bukowski, just simply recording, on my little microphone, talking about life. And nor do I want to be some type of like radio DJ type, audiobook type, or anything like that. But I think, making YouTube and making YouTube videos, I woke up this morning with one thought on my mind, and that's, if I don't show up, I'm betraying myself, right? I'm letting myself down. I'm letting my audience down, right? So right now I'm kind of at this point in my life where I'm at the intersection of what is, what was, and what can be. And I'm really frustrated because I feel like I'm constantly having to talk about the past, or be in the past and talk about things from my past. And it's not that I have an issue with that, right? I'm working on a Pokemon video right now, I'm working on Parasite Eve video, I'm working on a video on the dating game, I'm working on 3 separate videos right now. But all of them I kind of have the same emotional crux or issue, that I'm like, damn dude, I'm kind of tired of just being stuck in the past. And I understand that like the past is all that is, right? Like, even visible light, as like understood as the visible light spectrum and wavelengths, like we only really see light from the past, light years, etc., etc., right? Like, conceptually that is a truth, and all we have is the future, right? But I get tired of like having to make work about my past, not because I dislike self-mythologizing, but because like I would rather spend 5 hours thinking about my future. I would rather spend 20-30 minutes talking about my future, right? But the future is ambiguous. And with the future being ambiguous, if you put something out into the universe, you always have that fail state, or that internal embarrassment and shame of like, oh, I'm gonna do this, or I'm going here, right? And then what if that doesn't happen, right? And I understand Marty Supreme, that doesn't even enter my consciousness, right? But it's too, for me, I get kind of frustrated because in creating a self mythology, quote unquote, or creating a self through the reflective gaze of self capture on social media, I become a little bit annoyed because I think self capture to the degree and self mythologizing and having to divulge and talk about and explain stuff is completely at odds with how I used social media when I was like in high school. And like, not for nothing, dude, I was on Tumblr every single day, like starting with my freshman year of high school. And during that period, I got a ton of followers, right? But I think having grown up on Tumblr, outside of every other social media, it's a different game. And this isn't to say I'm shallow, I'm vain, or vapid, or I only care about appearances, right? But hear me out when I say this. I want to create an exterior world that is as vibrant, alive, colorful, but reflective of my interior world. And I get frustrated not because I'm shallow, vain, vapid, and that I don't care about the people in my life or anything like that, but I want a world and people and spaces that are on the same wavelength as me, that are resonant with my internal world, with the images that I spend hours looking at, right? I understand that it's natural for people to have that dissonance, right? But in a certain way, it's unnatural. But I also look back and I think about, as I get older, and as I fall more into adulthood, um, my adolescence, quote unquote, or that youth and that world of creating a youth and being around people partying, being in spaces that have a certain zeal and oeuvre about them, that have a certain uh, vibe and energy that is worth capturing, that's worth, being a mise en scène, is less and less, because more of the people in my life have started to, fall into the nuclear family. I have friends with kids. I have people who are like, working like very professional jobs, who have very tight schedules. And granted, they get to like aestheticize and, but even that certain aestheticization is at odds with how I have and continuously want to create and, do and perform like my life, right? Like social media is a performance, self capturing and talking and mythologizing is a performance, no matter how you look at it, right? But I also understand that for me, there's an internal shame of, I go through my Instagram, and because of like having to make social media, and because social media in a lot of ways is not only my ticket out, but it's also how I converse and engage with a larger form, bigger than myself or bigger than just a local community. I get frustrated because so much of my Instagram is like photography, like it was film photography, right? And it was precisely that and that alone, right? In a way that I did not want to, um, I guess, project or put anything out there that wasn't my film photography, right? Which was just a photo diary. But I grew up in the era of the photo diary. Like I started taking pictures because of people who influenced me, like Petra Collins, Hero Mix. I can't really think of much more off the top of my head, but I also understand that with those and those images and those captures, yes, those images are staged to a certain degree. Like any photo diary also usually will have somebody pose or, stop the action to take that picture, right? But there is a certain authenticity in that mise en scène. It's not like a Vogue photo shoot where a bunch of people get together and create a set and then act said set out, capture said set, and then sell that as authentic. But I mean, who knows? That could be what a lot of people are doing. But I also think when you get to a certain point in life, as mean as this is going to sound, I don't want this to come across as shallow or vapid or like, oh, people don't fit into my aesthetic or anything. But it's that, like, when you're around people who are of the same wavelength, who like the things you like, naturally your get-togethers become an aesthetic, like, unit, right? That get together, that being in a space, that having those moments becomes a quote unquote aesthetic, right? Because it is a reflection of your life, right? But it too is a reflection of the amalgamations of all the people in the room, no matter how much you are trying to aura farm, right? But I know for me, I can oftentimes feel at odds with creation, mainly due to the fact that, like, I'm not whining, I'm not complaining, I'm just speaking in a very, not so much vapid, or I'm being candid, right? I feel at odds with my own creation, mainly because, like, while yes, when I was a child and when I was a teenager, I used to love watching my X, Y, and Z collection videos, my do 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 collection videos. Here are 10 do 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 videos, right? And I understand that to a certain extent and to a certain degree, that is how people communicate and have community with the larger form of social media. But to me, I don't want to create anything that doesn't have a certain level of artistic integrity or artistic intent, because I grew up on Tumblr, right? And I grew up in a world that was predicated on personal self-expression before you pushed that out into your larger form. Like, I didn't grow up on fandom Tumblr. I grew up on art Tumblr. I grew up on, oh, we're looking at, gallery images, flyers, etc. And with that, there's a certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, that and how you capture those images are completely different than, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, a lot of social media feels like a lot of images and no emotion. And I want to put emotion, thought, feeling, and intent out into the world. But how do I do that where I could simply essentially just put a bunch of still lifes of my space in my room, right? Which, yeah, that's something, right? But that's nothing. And I understand that that is what I want and what I intend for the images and the objects within the scene to speak for themselves. But I also feel like that speaks to a larger point of commodity fetishization. But I understand that commodity fetishization is a point of identity creation by proxy. Case in point, that's really all it is. But I also too understand that, like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I don't have friends, I don't have people around. But I also understand that I was the photographer friend, right? I was never the one who was really the subject in the first place. And B, that, like, when like I don't want to just capture still lifes of my environment, or like postmodern quote unquote American suburbia, and I hate even saying the term suburbia because I grew up lower middle class. But the second you say suburbia, that, like, puts in a lot of people's mind a certain middle class gated community lifestyle. But it's no, like, I grew up, like, loitering at Walmart and going to Waffle House and having coffee and just sitting there, but not in the hyper Midwest Ethel Cain way, but in, like, a very breezeway exchange in New Jersey type way, which even then I would argue that my childhood and my youth and the spaces that are around me aren't that rural, right? Like, there's a very loitering in a Kroger-ness to the world that I exist in, right? And I understand that loitering in Kroger is something, right? Bowling alone is something. But it's also like, I don't have anyone to capture that, but it's also deep down, we all know that feels kind of lame, right? There's a difference in doing that and capturing it and performing that. You see what I'm saying? And I understand that, like, you would want that because that is an authentic portrayal of yourself. But at the same time, if you go through and you look at your own self-mythology, right, and you see a lot of loitering in Kroger, but it's, done and shot aesthetically, yes, that's beautiful, right? And yes, it's a performance. but that speaks to a greater, I guess, lack of interest in the world that you exist in, and a greater loneliness in the world that you exist in, which is partially why I find creating a little bit frustrating, because like I have what I'm at odds with, which is my internal world and my own personal world. And my, not to harp on like the stuff that's happened to me, but my house didn't look like my bedroom, right? And my family lost our house to like foreclosure, unfortunately. But like that bedroom was my space and an internal world that I created for myself, right? It was a personification and an extension of who I am. I'm not whining, I'm not complaining, right? But I struggle to create that in a digital space, because like that, like tools and what you have, right? But two, with that also, I'd argue that my sensibility and my taste is a little bit more like mature. And I don't want to say it's softcore or softcore adjacent, but like, yeah, like I prefer an image that contains a certain level of nudity, not because I like objectification, but because I love the intimacy of nudity, right? Everything on social media is a simulacrum or a simulation of reality being performed, but especially without that candidness, that nudity, and kind of the way images are captured with the photo diary, which is what I grew up from. And I come from the perspective of somebody who, used to carry a 35mm camera and still does when I'm actually doing stuff that's worth capturing everywhere, right? And capturing that, nudity, undress, and all. Like, I have so many pictures, and I probably will never share them because, it's my ex in like various states of undress. But I kind of wish that we got to a certain level where we both, and she felt comfortable with that being performed, and we kind of did. Like, there were like semi nude pictures of like them on my Instagram, but like that was something that she had consented to, right? That was something that she okayed and said I could do. And it's not for the sake of objectification, right? But it's for the sake of sharing a certain kind of authentic and candid intimacy that is missing from social I'm sorry, I swallowed, but that's missing from social media. And I find it really frustrating that, like, yes, I understand that life isn't a Pinterest mood board, but I also find it very frustrating and annoying that so much shit from my Pinterest mood board gets deleted because of violations, right? Like, it's so interesting the way that, like, the internet has cracked down on any image that's not PG-13, but it makes the rest of social media, A, so dry, right? But B, everything else is like such a hyper extreme pornographic image, right? People on TikTok will say corn, right? And like, it's so, like, I feel like sensuality and like a certain gentle softness, but a softness that's designed to be alluring and tantalizing in a way that the pornographic image isn't, is missing from social media, right? Like, there's not, I guess, softcore lifestyle wealth porn. It's just hardcore lifestyle wealth porn. So that's why I find it interesting. Like, what do I watch on YouTube, right? Like, so, mimic and mirror what I consume. It's literally just motherfuckers mildly aura farming, but then talking about, bro, like, my muse, blah, 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 blah. Here's how I create, blah, 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 right? And, like, I have a muse, right? And I have muses, but I'd argue that, while I like them and I'm admired to them, I don't also want to fall overly, like, head over heels or overly value those muses and those things, not because I dislike them, but I also think I try not to put any other person on a pedestal, and maybe that's my own fault. That's what I'd say is one of my, like, red flags, or I guess a fatal flaw of mine, is that I don't look up to people. Like, I see everybody as human. I don't put anyone or anything on a pedestal, but I also do that partially because I've been let down in the past, and I don't want to do that, but I also know that that's not that's safe, or what's the word I'm looking for? That's not healthy. Like, it's not healthy to put another person on a pedestal above yourself, right? Um, I don't know. Maybe I should break for commercial and then just yap some more, but I'm also like, I know I have to string together a video, so what collection of images and music am I going to string together that can make this video feel like a cohesive unit that's not just me looking at and talking to the camera? Not that I dislike that, and not that I'm not willing to do that, but I also do that every fucking day of my life as a TikToker. This isn't me complaining or whining, right? And yeah, oh, go outside, shoot at the thrift store, blah blah blah. I could, but I don't really find that the image that I'd capture there would be of value, would make me feel satisfied or content with my output. But I also find kind of filming in public a little bit obnoxious to a certain degree, and I'd rather not do that to other people, because I understand that those people didn't consent to being filmed, that are in the background. And I get it, you either build the bridge and get over it, or, stop complaining, or just do it, which I probably at some point will do. But it's also just like, I don't want to consume for the sake of just creating content. And I consume in the fact that, like, I don't want to have to go shopping to make content for people to consume vicariously. Which, like, yeah, that is what social media is, right? Like, oh my god, we're gonna do each other's makeup. Oh my god, I'm unboxing this makeup palette. Oh my god, here's 99 t-shirts worn all at once, right? Like, I don't find those things interesting. It's not that I don't find those things interesting, but, like, I guess what I consume, I ask for a deeper reflection of an internal reality that poses questions about humanity and what it means to be human. Not that everything needs to be fucking deep, or, oh my god, I fucking love fart jokes, right? I love burp jokes. But I too sit down and, I'm like, what do I consume that has value, right? And I'm not saying that everything has to be a certain way, but I find myself like, what the fuck does this have to do with me? Why am I watching this when watching stuff sometimes? Not because I think I'm better than them or anything like that. And maybe this is I might be on the spectrum, I have neurodivergentness because I have ADHD. But, like, I find myself frustrated because it's like, yeah, I can consume, right? Let's say I'm watching a skate video, like, I'm like, why the fuck am I watching somebody skate? I can just go outside and use my skateboard, right? I can do that. So I find that a little bit annoying and frustrating, not because I dislike these things or these people or I think I'm better than them, but I sit down and I'm like, what is this feeding me? And I know that sounds ugly or mean or disrespectful. I understand that you kind of consume content based on somebody's personality, not what their, story or the content, but like the person, right? That's kind of why social media exists and is the way it is. But I don't know. I can just find myself, like, I don't want to, like, I like talking about stuff from the past, yes, but I look back on these videos, and all the videos that I have on this channel and what I talk about, and I get it, right? But I also don't want to fucking talk about something from 20 years ago again. And it's not that I dislike talking about something from 20 years ago. It's that, like, I get tired of, like, recounting my own childhood. And it's like, I don't want to talk about dating horror stories either, though, because that doesn't really feel innately fair. But I'm also, like, not trying to self-mythologize in a Carrie Bradshaw type way. Like, I kind of keep that to myself. And maybe I will, who knows, in 2 years there might be hella pictures of me in my underwear. Like, I'm Petra Collins, I'm writing for fucking Vogue and Elle magazine, talking about sex, dating, sex lies and videotape, whatever. I don't know. It's on James Spader, but, like, that's just how I feel. You know what I mean? Like, I my sensibility is not sleazy or trashy, but it's like moody. It's smoke filled, and I like that, and I want more of that. But I think with what YouTube is, and by nature of capture, performance, and self performance, the idea of somebody like fogging out a room to make it seem like a damn, jazz lounge and like putting on jazz and like then talking to the camera is so like eye rollingly, like nauseatingly corny. Like I remember I was watching this video for the Pokemon video, and I got kind of annoyed because like the person was like overly costumey. And it's not that there's anything wrong with being in costume. I'm just like you know what I mean? It just threw me off. And it's not like I think it's cute. I would prefer more YouTubers and content creators do a fucking cosplay in their video than show up looking like a normal like I prefer that. I will. But sometimes there's just a slight dissonance in that. Um I don't know. I'm moody. Let's just put it that way. I think about sweetheart grips from World War II pistols a lot. I think about like the interplay of like that and those things, and I don't know. I have a very particular vibe, but I don't know. I should cut for commercials and then maybe film and edit this because I think this is at least 20 to 30 minutes of talking. So maybe this is the video. Maybe I'll make a cool, pretty aesthetic thumbnail. What am I gonna title it? I don't fucking know. I don't know. I'm either at the track or on the fucking Macintosh.
Thank you, Mahler. I borrow from you. I never pay you back. I smoke too much. I drink too much, but I can't write too much. It just keeps coming, and I call for more, and it arrives and mixes with Mahler. Sometimes I deliberately stop myself. I say, wait a moment, go to sleep, or look at your 8 cats, or sit with your wife on the couch. You're either at the track or with the Macintosh. And then I stop, put on the brakes, park the damn thing. Some people have written that my writing has helped them to go on. This helped me too. The drinking, the riding, the horses, the 8 cats, my wife. There's a small balcony here. The door is open and I can see the lights of all the cars on the Harbor Freeway south. They never stop, that roll of lights on and on. All those people, what are they doing? What are they thinking? We're all set to die, all of us. What a circus. That alone should make us love each other, but it doesn't. We are terrorized and flattened by trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing. Keep it going, Mahler. You made this a wondrous night. Don't stop, you son of a bitch. Don't stop.
Hello there! Can I interest you in the taste of delicious Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill? Ooh, it's so refreshing. Tastes just like malt liquor, but it looks like wine. I know it tastes like shit, but you're stuck with it. Bye. Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. One sip and your strawberry fields will go straight away. This is an ad for my Patreon, by the way. Sometimes I say that, sometimes I don't. Please join. You get access to a multitude of things. You get access to a Discord server. You get access to like notes and videos in progress and works in progress, etc. I'll try to get a lot better with keeping up with that. I don't know. YouTube's a lot of work. it really is a lot of work. Sometimes it can be immensely rewarding, other times it can be immensely frustrating. Though I thank you so much for being here, sticking with me, listening to the video, even watching the video, because I know a lot of people watch it in another tab. That being said, I don't know, every time I try and make a video, it turns into an amalgamation of like this in some way, shape, or form, which is really frustrating, but I think that's just indicative of something else. I don't know, but I think I do have some valid and or astute criticisms in this one, though it's a little bit shorter and we're heading into the closing of it. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a nice one. Bye-bye. Hello, this isn't me being whiny or complaining, though I grew up on the internet, right? So thank you for letting me speak, giving me that floor, and just, I just want to talk, and these are observations. And thank you for listening to me thus far, and more or less getting into bed with me, right? Because that's kind of what the endless sleepover is, or at least what I'm referring to as this kind of wave of content, and just kind of the way content and content creation feels, right? I'm not sure if I talked about this in this clip or a clip that's in here, but if you've ever seen those fashion neuroses videos, they're shot from above, which is meant to create a certain level of intimacy as well as vulnerability in the subject, because when you capture somebody from that angle, rather than like down below, which the only reason I'm using a downward angle right now is because it's really the only space I can fit my camera. That being said, yeah, I've noticed that trend. That being said, I kind of hate online aesthetics. This is me reading, by the way, simply because they are a form of power leveling, and it's not like I'm interested in this. No, it's how authentic I can recreate Y2K, 70s, etc. And it's never liking those things individually or the sums of their parts. Like for example, I went to Art Basel a few years ago, not because I like wanted to go to Art Basel, yes, but to also say I went to Art Basel, right? And be there and be inside of Art Basel is what I'm saying, right? And the gaze of social media is innately pornographic, and I wasn't doing that in a pornographic way per se to make content and like capture that I was there, but there was, a fact of me wanting to later show and perform that I went to Art Basel. But it's like this kind of conspicuous consumption and the performance of hobbies and community as well as interest online that I'm kind of talking about, right? The endless slumber party is like when I had Kuon, but it was just chilling in the back of my old videos, right? I never mentioned explicitly that it was like the most expensive PS2 game, but if I wanted to perform that content, I would then make a video, in maximizing engagement and clicks. I'd title it something like I played the most expensive PS2 game, or something that innately talked about the monetary value and like the actual value of the game rather than the merit of the text, right? Like the secondary price of the game is what is highlighted because the conspicuous consumption of social media rather than the merit of the text. And like I got that game because I like horror games, and I was interested in FromSoft. I don't really like FromSoft games, but I at least tried it. That being said, like it's like the endless slumber party is like soft core, like wealth porn, right? It's wealth porn that's not overt wealth porn, but it's also like the endless slumber party is like the overt hardcore wealth porn where it's like, try my new $2,000 Bugatti, because it's like you're just like that. Hold on, no. So you have like slumber party style content, which is kind of what I do, but then you have like overt wealth porn, and that's what I'm trying to say. But that being said, it's like the way people do reference or react to things, like you're watching other YouTube videos with other YouTubers, you're watching them react to stuff that you would again do at a sleepover, right? And like I'd argue that because of copyright, etc., you can't have as far as like the same level of connection to these things. Like I remember Twitch when they banned like music. That's not fair to a lot of those musicians who would have benefited from that outlet. YouTube has a similar like draconian copyright system, but like something like Instagram or TikTok doesn't have as bad copyright, but like also that's kind of fucked up, like that commercial level, or that level of commercialism has hindered like the natural progress in conversation and call and response of like culture, right? And like that's not slumber party adjacent, but that's like commercially, and that's kind of what I meant about like this hauntological kind of simulacrum of intimacy, or even like a slumber party, right? um like I know who my favorite bands are because like I've talked to no I know who my friends favorite bands are because I've had conversations with them about it, but I can't tell you like what my favorite content creators favorite bands are, or etc unless they've like passively worn a band's t-shirt or talked about them multiple times. And it's little things like that, right? Like one of my fondest memories is that like a lot of my fondest memories were just hanging out and being in people's bedrooms, and that's kind of why I stopped making the Pokemon video, because I felt like I was just talking about my past a little too much. But with that, and with hanging out in people's bedrooms, we were just watching a movie. It was like six people crammed onto one bed, right? You can't really do that in adulthood or like prolonged adolescence or your early 20s, because you're too damn tall, A, and B, nobody wants to really be crammed up in somebody's bedroom all damn day. But like with people being online and social media, what are people doing other than watching other people in their bedroom, in their personal spaces, and having these dialogues and these conversations, maybe commenting and then watching it again, right? But for me, I get kind of frustrated because like when I've lived in a walkable city, one of the instances that I've had in a sense of community and urgency type way, like I met a person, never spoke to them before, right? Just had a conversation, and then we chatted over a mutual love of Godard films, and then we ended up sleeping together. And like that's like a sense of urgency, and that's not something that you get from the internet or in our postmodern Tinder age, right? And like, yeah, there was a sense of like performance where it's like, like we enjoyed the same music and all of that, but it's also like that sense of community and urgency. Like even swiping through Tinder, because Tinder and the nature of what it is, people are swiping and scrolling, always looking for something else. So those conversations that you have on Tinder take like a week to get started, another week for the talking phase, and then you're like, you only get the week by like you only get the date by week 3. Like there's not a sense of urgency, and that's something that you used to get in like a walkable city, right? I've experienced that sense of urgency in a walkable city. Do I want my life to be a Godard film? No, right? But that is to say that Godard films existed as something that was meant to mimic real life, and it's kind of a shame that like the real life in America still hasn't caught up. But like you look at foreign films and stuff like that, and that's mimicking real life there, and there's like just simply a sense or a lack of a sense of community and youth culture in America that I find so innately frustrating. And the French New Wave was directly in response to the more commercialized white picket fence and sanitized like view and idea of like adulthood and what life looked like in Hollywood, right? And I guess I'm upset that my life doesn't look like a French New Wave film, but I'm also like, am I wrong for asking for that? You know, I spend a lot of my time doing stuff that they do in French New Wave films, reading philosophy, sitting in bedrooms, etc. But because of like capitalism, etc., I have to do it digitally with the simulation and simulacrum of that. So that's what I was touching on. That being said, this is extremely long. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. I'm as always greatly appreciative. I know I'm kind of rushing through this and just talking really fast. I just had my coffee. I'm like on the last leg. I'm just trying to get a good close for this. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. Thank you for getting into bed with me, being intimate, all of that. That's what I mean. Like this is in very slumber party adjacent. Take your ass to bed. Have a nice one. Bye.
I like awful TV shows. You like awful TV shows.